You awaken to find yourself alone in bed the next morning. You sit up quickly, allowing your eyes to dart around the dimly lit room with eager optimism, but he's not there. You close your eyes and curse to yourself. Of course he wasn't there. You hadn't expected him to be, and yet you cursed yourself for falling asleep all the same. You knew you wouldn't have been able to convince him to stay, and you supposed you should have been grateful that he left while you were sleeping so you didn't cause a scene or a collapse in a fit of emotions, but all the same, you wish he had stayed. Kylo Ren was a man of his word, and if he said that this was the last time you were going to see him, he meant it. He wouldn't have gone as far as he had with you last night if he hadn't. So he had finally gone into your pants. You bite your lip and shake your head, resisting the urge to cry. He hadn't gotten it into your head, though. He could have quite easily, and yet he had decided against it, revealing his true motives. He liked you after all. Kylo Ren liked you, and now he was never going to see you again. Well, aren't I special? You murmur to yourself. It's early yet, and you take a quick shower. You don't know what you're going to say to Taro today. The wall was down now. Could he help you get it back up? You didn't even know there had been a wall to begin with. Maybe it would gradually repair itself over time? You hadn't a clue, but Taro was definitely the best person to give you answers. He wouldn't be happy that the wall had collapsed, but what could you say? Kylo Ren was stronger than you. It was only a matter of time before he overpowered you eventually. You bite your lip, deep in thought. You were going to have to work on that lie if you wanted to make it sound more convincing. He didn't overpower you. He had simply given you enough of a motive to make you give in to him. And after you had, you were no longer interesting. You were no longer a challenge. You can't be alone right now. You can't let yourself get stuck inside your own head and overthink this. You couldn't exactly talk to Ladson about it, but at least he could cause enough of a distraction to help preoccupy your thoughts. You dress quickly and head into the living room. Bea and Ladson are already sitting quietly on the couch when you walk in, not speaking. They don't even look up as you walk in. Sit down, Bea says quietly. The fine hairs on your arms prick up as you walk slowly into the room, sitting down on the edge of one of the couches. Ladson avoids your eyes. What's wrong? Your voice is shaking, and Ladson just bows his head and shakes it from side to side as if that was a question you shouldn't have asked. What were you doing last night? Bea asks. His voice is so quiet, and you can feel yourself trembling. Nothing, you say lamely, but as soon as the word passes your lips, you know it's the wrong thing to say. We heard you, Ladson says. We heard, noises. You close your eyes as the realization comes over you. You knew you hadn't exactly been quiet last night, but in the moment, you hadn't cared. You figured they were all asleep anyway. You had been getting away with it for this long. You had just figured that no one else would find out about it now. It's over now, you say quickly, shaking your head. We ended things last night. He's not coming back again. Ladson hears something in your tone and looks up at you, finally. He looks concerned as he chews his bottom lip thoughtfully. Who was he? Bea asks. He's still not looking at you, and it suddenly dawns on you that you're much more scared of Bea right now than you ever were of Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren, you say quietly. Bea looks up, not at you directly, but his gaze lifts slightly. Ladson just shakes his head. That's still not funny, he says, and you sigh. You hadn't really expected them to believe you, but at least you could appreciate that you had given them some small nugget of honesty. Who was he? Bea repeats. You want to make some joke like, how'd you know it was a he? But it's not funny. Nothing's funny right now. It was as if all the air had suddenly been sucked out of the room. Some stormtrooper, Bea repeats. And did you happen to interpret for him during the duration of your time here? You don't like the way he phrases the question. Maybe once or twice? Maybe once or twice, he repeats, and he looks up now, still not looking at you directly. Instead, when he speaks next, he addresses the doorway some distance behind you. You do realize that in engaging in sexual relations with a client, you have broken numerous codes of ethics that were specifically outlined in your contract. You start to speak, but he holds up his hand to stop you. I am hereby releasing you from your contract, he says firmly. You are to have no further contact with any of the Tortudaru, especially Taro. But I need to talk to him. He shoots you a look and it silences you immediately. Nor shall you have any communication with anyone else on this base, including Latson, Sadie, or Shane. You stare at him, eyes widening. Latson just looks down and away. Myself excluded, I will bring you meals twice a day, in the morning and at night. You are now prohibited from the living room and kitchen area. You will stay in your room, which will remain unlocked for the duration of your stay until we get back to academia. He sighs and puts his hands together. Hopefully this punishment is severe enough to dissuade you from making this sort of mistake again in the future. You blink at him. So you're just going to lock me in my room until it's time to go home? He nods his head curtly. But that's not fair. It was only the once, and I told you, it's over. I have reason to suspect it was more than once, B says. You turn to Ladson, who avoids your gaze. Either way, once is enough. You read your contract and agreed to the terms set within. Fine, you say stiffly. They both look up at you, and if you can read the expressions right, they both look a little surprised. Clearly, they hadn't expected you to give in so easily. You don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you cry. You turn around and walk as calmly as you can back to your room, closing the door behind you. You lie back down on your bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to force your breathing to remain steady. You close your eyes and can almost feel the warmth of Kylo lying in the bed next to you. That's the final straw that pushes you over the edge. Hot tears prick at the corners of your eyes, and you roll over and bite into your pillow to keep from making too much noise. You can't allow them to hear you cry. You can't. You had identified what had made you happy. Working with Taro, hanging out with Sadie, playing around with Ladson, and kissing Kylo Ren. One by one, those things had all been taken from you, and now there was nothing left. Now you were really and truly alone. You wouldn't even have your weekly self-defense lessons anymore. At the very least, you still had your staff, but you had to be careful and make sure B didn't find that, or he would probably take that away from you too. But to lock you in your room by yourself, without any sort of communication for the rest of your time here? What would you do all day, for weeks on end, besides drive yourself mad? You roll over and wrap your arms around your pillow. You don't dissolve into a puddle of emotions. You should be thankful for that, but you can't be thankful for anything right now. B comes in a little while later to bring you a mug of tea and a plate of food. He sets it down on the desk wordlessly, but you don't sit up. You don't even look at it, let alone touch it. You were half considering starving yourself, but honestly, what good would that do? If you stopped eating, he would probably try to force feed you, or worse, just send you down to the medical ward and have them feed you through tubes for the rest of your time here. And what if Kylo Ren got word of what had become of you? What if he saw you wasting away on a medical slab, scrawny and underfed, with needles sticking out of your arms? You shake your head. Disgusting. Pathetic. You wouldn't let those words be used to describe you. You try to keep your thoughts quiet as you slip out of bed and onto the floor. You were distinctly aware that the wall was gone now, and you could probably reach out to Kylo Ren if you focused. That was why he had left, you realized sullenly, because now it was too easy to reach out to each other. As difficult as it was for you, you would respect him and his wishes. If he wanted to avoid you, so be it. You would not clog up his thoughts with idle pangs of longing. No, you were stronger than that. You would not let him know that you were locked in your room like some kind of prisoner. He didn't want to hear your name again, and he wouldn't. You would do your damnedest to make sure of that. You snicker quietly to yourself, imagining if B happened to mention your transgressions and subsequent punishment to General Hux and the others at their meeting this morning. Would Kylo Ren be there? If he was, what would he do? Would he get up and smash through a console again? Would he be apathetic? You honestly didn't know, and you knew you shouldn't care. It would probably be best to direct all thoughts away from him. It was going to be a difficult 10 weeks as it was. Focusing on how much you missed him would only add to your misery. Sitting on the floor, you gradually push yourself to your knees, hands spread shoulder-width apart as you push yourself onto your toes. You hated doing push-ups. Honestly, it was the worst thing. You had absolutely no upper arm strength to speak of, and they made you absolutely miserable. But you did them now. There was nothing else to do, quite frankly, and you'd be damned if you let your muscles atrophy and go to waste while you were here alone. You had books to keep you company, but that was beside the point. You were going to have to quickly learn to become your own best friend, or else your mental state was going to start deteriorating rapidly. You had thought that the first half of your time here had been hard, but at least you had been able to distract yourself. Now there were no distractions. Now it was just you here by yourself. You try to think of the positives, like how you wouldn't have to worry about hiding your hickeys anymore. No more stupid scarves. The thought cheers you up mildly, and you force yourself to smile, showing your teeth. In one of your classes back at academia, they had told you that if you forced yourself to smile during stressful events, it could actually trick the brain into making yourself happier. It had sounded like bullshit at the time, and it sounded like bullshit now, but did you really have anything to lose by just trying it? Yes, you did. You felt like a lunatic, like someone slowly slipping off the edge of insanity, and so you quickly shake your head and dispel the thought, letting your face drop back into a neutral position. No, you were going to feel what you were going to feel, and trying to delude yourself into thinking that this dilemma wasn't as bad as it seemed would get you nowhere. Your arms are starting to get weaker now, and you drop to your knees to make it a little easier, keeping your core tight as you slowly move your body up and down. Maybe you could do sit-ups next, or crunches. It would also be a good time to play with your staff while everyone was at work. Heck, you could probably even use your datapad to make a workout schedule for yourself. 1 hour for push-ups. 1 hour for sit-ups, 1 hour of jogging in place. It would get tedious after a while, but you had literally nothing else to do here for 10 weeks. You had better make the most of it. And you did, at least for a few days, probably at least 3 or 4. You kept your thoughts quiet, your emotions muted. Beat continued to come into your room twice a day as promised to deliver your food. You didn't look at him, and he didn't look at you. No one came to try to talk to you, even at night, probably out of fear of their own reprimand. You didn't care, or at least you tried not to. You had yelled at Sadie the last time you'd spoken to her. Would you be able to repair your relationship when you got back home? Maybe. Honestly, you weren't even sure if you wanted to. You weren't going to be the same person you had been when you first left academia, not after your experience with Kylo Ren, and not after 10 weeks of pure, unadulterated solitude. You weren't stupid. You weren't trying to hold on to some last remaining shred of yourself. This was going to change you. You knew that. You didn't know what you were going to change into, maybe some hardened, coarsened version of yourself, but you supposed you would just have to let it come and see what happened. In the meantime, you continued to work out, pushing your muscles to the point of exhaustion. The first day had been rough, but you had allowed yourself to collapse when you hit your point of fatigue, panting on the floor with your cheek pressed against the rough carpet. You had stayed that way for minutes, for hours. It didn't matter. Time was no longer something that concerned you. The only thing that did concern you, though, was the coming and going of everyone around you. You knew that you could probably step into the kitchen or living room while they were gone, but honestly, what would even be the point of that? Be it told you that you were forbidden, and although you didn't know how he could make your punishment any worse, you didn't dare test it. It wasn't worth it. So you decided to just resign yourself to the confines of your room, working off of the small workout schedule that you had scribbled down, stopping only to sleep, or shower, or eat the small plates of food that Bea left you twice a day. It was a pattern that you fell into quite quickly, probably because you didn't dare let yourself question it. You didn't let your thoughts run wild like you had before. You would stay quiet, stay focused, and let things run their course. There was no use fighting something you couldn't change. Idly, you almost wondered if you should try to focus on training yourself in the Force, but you didn't know how to go about it, and it might summon Kylo Ren back into your thoughts, and that was a name you wouldn't allow yourself to say, or even think. So you kept yourself quiet and stuck to training your body physically, deciding that when you returned to academia, you would not follow Kylo Ren's advice. You would leave, hop on the first ship headed off the planet, and head far into the depths of the galaxy. You knew enough languages and cultures to blend in almost anywhere. He had been right about that. And if you were lucky enough to meet someone who would teach you how to pilot a ship, you could go anywhere yourself. But you had to be stronger first, both physically and mentally, and you hoped these 10 weeks would give you enough time to do just that. Fortunately or unfortunately, there were forces at work, forces beyond your knowledge. You had always known that they were there in the back of your mind. You had known that your presence on board was required for a reason, but you had never gotten enough information to be able to put the pieces together. Still, you would try to puzzle it out regardless with the small bits of information that you had received, coincidentally or accidentally trying to figure out if you were the good guy or the bad guy in whatever was going on around you. It would have relieved you to know that you were neither. Your presence on board was supposed to be neutral, and for all intents and purposes of the overall mission, it was. You had no idea about the conflict that lay both behind and in front of you. They had wanted to keep you as ignorant of the campaign as possible, and you had been. They had hoped that it would continue to go on all around you, like the air that you breathed into your lungs, circulating and flowing through you without you being made aware of it directly. You would notice its absence, of course, but if you had just kept going about your business, your attention would never be called to it. It hadn't been your fault. It had been a series of little slip-ups, a series of little mistakes. They would have caught on eventually, even if you hadn't let your mind slip. And, truth be told, you had played your part quite well, considering you didn't even know you were playing one. You would let something else slip, a name, and although that was one of the central pieces that allowed them to put everything together, that was hardly your fault. Maybe if they had told you what was going on from the start, you would have known better. But you didn't. No one told you anything. They thought it would be easier that way. And in a way, they were right. In a way, they were wrong. At least they had gotten halfway through their objective, but you would never be sure if their mission was quite as successful as they hoped it would be. That night, as you lay sound asleep in your bed, your muscles sore and aching from your daily exertions, a troop of stormtroopers marched down the corridor. There were 6 of them at each of the 5 doors. It was hardly necessary for there to be that many, but General Hux had been infuriated with the ruse going on as long as it had, and wanted you to feel the brute force of his anger firsthand. They opened up the door without bothering to knock, and, as you slept, they pushed you out of bed onto the floor, rolling you over onto your stomach. Your first thought as you blinked yourself awake was that Kylo Ren had come back for some reason or another, but as you saw the sea of white helmets over your shoulder, you knew what you feared in your heart to be true. This wasn't just some assignment. They hadn't just been withholding information for your safety. They did it to keep their motives as clandestine as possible. But apparently they had been discovered, and now you were going to have to pay the price. At least you wouldn't have to stay in this room anymore. Are you going to come quietly? You hear Stormtrooper ask from directly behind you. Your arms were pressed uncomfortably into your back as you squirmed on the floor beneath them. You couldn't fight all 6 of them when you couldn't even get one to release you, but you would still put up a fight for as long as you could. Nope. Your eyelids fluttered shut as you felt the sudden electrical pulse of a stun blaster against your back. The last thought that swam through your mind before you slipped into unconsciousness was that you hoped you would at least find out the purpose of their mission here before the First Order decided to execute you.